Thank you, sir.
Okay, so it's podcast number 3. So the last podcast we looked at how to focus, and this podcast we are going to be looking at distractions and flow, how to manage distractions and flow. So Matt, why is that important?
Well, it's actually critical because to get important and complicated work done, you need to be able to hit a state of flow. And when I talk about flow, what I'm talking about is that kind of place, that mental and emotional place where you're completely absorbed by the task. Things almost become quite effortless, and it enables you to really think quite deeply about issues and problems. And often these are the kind of work, tasks, projects that can cause us a lot of stress, and they can appear quite daunting. I know these are often the kind of things where I can wake up in the middle of the night thinking about them, feeling a bit intimidated by them. And it's that state of flow that we need to hit to be able to tackle them.
Do all tasks fall into that category? Is it certain tasks?
No, definitely
okay.
not. It tends to be the bigger, more complex tasks where you really need to hit that state of flow. But there's a problem, Tim, which you alluded to when you introduced this podcast, which is there are just so many facets of working life that prevent us getting anywhere near that state of flow.
So how is this affecting us then? I mean, it sounds as though, you're talking about what we can do, but how is this currently affecting us? You're kind of on it now, aren't you?
Absolutely. Well, one of the sources that we used in talking about this, described flow as a highly pleasurable and concentrated state of mind in which we're enormously productive. So if you don't hit it, you're depriving yourself of a highly pleasurable experience. And I'm sure we can all relate to that experience where you focus on something and you get completely absorbed by it. You do really good work, and afterwards you look at it and you think, wow, that's amazing. Did I produce that? And you feel so energized by it. And of course, it's taken a big, hairy, horrible task off your to-do list. So problem number one is you're depriving yourself of the ability to do that. The second thing is you're depriving yourself of the ability to be enormously productive. But at the and both of those things have a huge impact on our energy. But there's two things at the root of that stop us hitting that state, Tim, which I think it's worth being aware of. One is, which you've alluded to, is distractions and a failure to manage them. The second thing is a failure to plan and to actually protect time where you're likely to hit flow.
Have you got any data to back this up? Because I'm thinking I feel naturally disorganized anyway. I'm always kind of got used to it. So I just tend to feel as though I'm somebody who just distracts myself. So what can people relate to? What's some data here to put some context on this?
Yeah, so Clockify, which is like a productivity at work organization, they published some research where they claim that between 70 and 99% of office-based employees feel quite a high level of distraction. And what is staggering is the average number of disruptions per day is 56. And the problem is with that, there's a Harvard article published by Amy Gallo called "What Do You Do When You're Feeling Distracted at Work," which is a really good article. But what she talks about in there, which I know to be the truth, the experience from my case, is when you get distracted from being in a state of flow, it can take you between 10 and 18 minutes to get back to that position of just being absorbed by something where you just feel, I've got this. Yeah. I mean, visually, the way I describe it, Tim, is particularly when you're working on something quite complex, it's almost a bit like I sink into it, and in my imagination, I've got all of the different elements of this task around me, and I'm kind of like I'm starting to pull them down and to connect them together. And it might be creating a presentation or a proposal or a project plan. And then when I get distracted, it's almost like poof, puff of smoke, it's all gone. And then I get back into it, and it takes me, as Amy Gallo says, that 10 to 18 minutes to kind of reassemble it. And what's really frustrating is sometimes I never reassemble it. It's like I know there's 2 bits I'm missing, and I can't somehow.
Well, I relate to that. I relate to kind of almost half in, half out on that.
Yeah. So it's really frustrating. And I mean, some other research that we've got. I mean, 75% of people say if they can master this, they believe they'll be more productive.
Is this the Clockify research as well?
It is.
Oh,
it
wow,
is.
okay.
44% of people say they deliver higher quality work when they master this. This is a big deal.
Yeah, well, stop teasing me because I'm wanting to know how to do this. All right, you're speaking to the converted, my friend. So come on then, help me, help our listeners.
Okay, well, there's a number of steps that we advise people to go through. I mean, the first step is the easiest one, which is identifying something you're working on which is causing you a bit of angst, and which is going to need a bit of thinking time to progress. And you mentioned in the last podcast, Tim, about mapping where you spend your energy, and you talked about a tool in the book. I mean, so the sort of things we're talking about is things in that matrix which are definitely important, and they may or may not be urgent depending on how long you've left it.
Oops.
Yeah, so that's step 1. Step 2 is, and this is easy to do but quite hard to protect, is to actually block out some time in your calendar when you're going to work on this. It might be 2 hours, it might be a whole day. It depends on how big it is, but block it out so nobody can nick it. And of course, people will try, but that's step 2. Step 3 is to actually find a space, and this is really important, where you can work uninterrupted, because we know most office environments are not conducive to doing that. It might be you need to work from home, you might need to book a private meeting room. 4th, in advance of that slug of time that you've blocked out, think about if there's any preparation you need to do beforehand, so that when you get into that space, you've got everything you need. It might be some research, it might be somebody needs to provide you with some important data. Make sure you've got that so you don't get thwarted right at the first moment. 5thly, start, as you're kind of approaching this time, start creating a loose plan of how you're going to structure that time. And I mean loose, but what it does is it means when you get into it, you've got this road that you can just start driving down.
I like the sound of that. Yeah.
6thly, and this is a really hard one.
Oops.
Yeah. Once you get into that space, turn off all things that could distract you.
Flight mode.
Well, yeah, exactly. Clockify said the biggest one that 56% of people talked about, you mentioned this on your last podcast, is phones.
Yeah.
Turn them off.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
Then once you start writing, or once you're in that space, actually ask yourself, what is an ideal outcome from this time? Then start working on the task. And because you've cut off distractions, because you've protected some time, you've actually created the conditions where you can start to hit flow. And I know from experience that when I do all of those things, and it's so easy to say it, but difficult to do it, I've created the conditions where it's possible and likely that I will hit flow. It's not guaranteed, but when I do, as I said with the quote, it's highly pleasurable and I do very productive work.
Okay. Yeah, you're making me think that I could probably do a bit more of that as well. Okay. So where do we go to find out a bit more then on this?
Well, people can go on to our website, rechargeability.com. They will find the notes from this podcast on there. It includes a bit more detail about all of those steps. So that is a brilliant downloadable resource. Also, and that's complimentary. And also, if you want to find out even more about this, then go to our book. There's a whole section on this, which explains a bit more about the psychology behind it. And that should help people.
Okay. Listen, thank you. Any final reflections on today before we say goodbye to podcast 3?
I guess what's jumping out to me as I was talking is a lot of this, I suspect, will make complete sense to people. There's probably nothing new in here that they've heard that they will think, "Oh, I've never heard of that." The challenge is doing it, and it's a challenge I face.
Yeah, well, thank you. Where I'm at is realizing there's certain tasks that I identify that need this, and just making sure I put this type of quality on those tasks and not give it kind of the mixed bag that I've been giving it. So thank you for reminding me.
Thanks everybody for listening. We wish you well.
Okay, see you on the next one.